Good evening. We are Chris Lee and Alfred Ezman of Southeastern 14. It's the end of the season. It's awards night. Awards night in college baseball and SEC baseball. What a night to be alive. We dress for the occasion. We take this very seriously. As you're about to find out, we're going to name 4 All-SEC teams because the league is that good. There's that many guys deserving of honor, and we're that maniacal about it. So, thank you for joining us tonight. We are glad you're here. We'll take your questions, your comments, your heckling. We'll unveil our All-SEC teams. We will do a little SEC tournament bubble talk for the NCAA tournament, all that. Boy, what an interesting weekend in SEC baseball. If you didn't see, I did an update this morning on a weekend wrap-up. My goodness, what a crazy weekend it was in SEC baseball. We have got maybe 11 teams heading to the NCAA tournament. Depending on what happens elsewhere in college baseball, Alfred will catch us up on some other storylines to watch, and other leagues will catch you up on some things to watch in Hoover. And again, we will give you all SEC teams. We're going to name a regular lineup, everybody in the field, catcher through outfield. Going to give you a DH who doesn't necessarily have to be a DH. We'll give you 3 starting pitchers because you start 3 guys on weekends, and a reliever because you always need a relief pitcher. So we are complete about how we do it here, and looking forward to bringing that to you. Alfred, welcome to the show. What a year in SEC baseball it has been, sir.
Yeah, we're going to have a ton of teams in the NCAA tournament, and like you said, even more depending on what some of these bubble teams do that we'll talk about in a little bit. But I saw the list before. There's a lot of good players we have on these 4 teams I guess we're going to do. So let's get started. I can't wait. It's been a great year and should be a great postseason.
Yeah, we'll get there. A reminder first, quickly, we are brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all your summer sports this season. From Major League Baseball, golf, the NBA, NHL playoffs, all the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every team out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on all the action. Bet online where the game starts. All right, we will start with our 4th team, and I'll read these. We will tweet these out later. And again, why are we doing 4 teams? Well, first of all, the league is incredibly good. You're going to see some kids who will eventually probably be first-round draft picks who will not make one of our 4 teams. I've covered 20 years of SEC baseball. This is the best I've ever seen in the league. Teams, talent, you name it, it is incredible. It is worthy of 4 teams. There are some guys who won't make this team could play for anybody. That is how tough it was. We wanted to honor everybody. We cheated occasionally a little bit. If a guy could play a position or had played it this year, we would occasionally move him there to get the best team on the field. The same thing that you see with football coaches do with their offensive lines. You might move a tackle to guard to get your best guys on the field. We didn't really take big liberties with that, but where we had a deficiency, we did it occasionally. So with that, your 4th team All-SEC starting at catcher, Alan Espinal of Vanderbilt, who had a really good season in conference play and overall power-hitting catcher. First baseman Ryan Nicholson, and boy, first base was a tremendous year for the SEC. You had 8 or 9 guys that might have made one of our 4 teams in a lot of years, and it's no surprise it is a power-hitting position in a year where there's a lot of power. Ryan Nicholson at Kentucky, the transfer from Cincinnati, was our 4th team first baseman. Second, R.J. Austin of Vanderbilt, who ended the season playing there, played some first base. That was another one of those get your best guy on the field positions. And also there was kind of a real drop off at second base after about 3 or 4 guys. So that's where we tried to get our best talent on the field. Third base, Andrew Fisher, a guy who ended up DHing at the end of the year. But again, you get your best guys on the field. And we did that with Andrew Fisher at Ole Miss, Ole Miss had 3 or 4 really good hitters this year. He was one of them, the Duke transfer. Shortstop Dean Curley at Tennessee, really strong year for shortstops. Curley is going to be a first teamer, I would bet, next year. And missed a little bit of time. That dinged him a little bit. But Dean Curley from Tennessee, your 4th team shortstop. Your outfield, Connor Hysack of Mississippi State, who really hit well late as State made a charge the second half of conference season. Ty Evans of Florida, who was having a really good year, probably their best hitter behind Jack Caglione. He got hurt late, we honored him with a fourth-team selection. Missed this weekend and got hurt, I think, last weekend, if I'm correct about that. But a power-hitting outfielder for Florida who had a really good year on a team that made a charge late and may make the NCAA tournament. Our last outfielder, Jackson Ross of Ole Miss, Florida Atlantic transfer, I believe, had a big year for the Rebels with the bat. That middle of the order was pretty good. Ole Miss did not have the year that it wanted on the whole, but Jackson Ross had no fault in any of that. And our DH, I use DH as kind of the best guy left that I don't put on one of these teams. So if I get down and we have, just a powerhouse third baseman or corner infielder, he may end up DHing, even if he didn't DH all year. In this case, our DH was the DH. That's Nicky Lopez at Kentucky, the switch-hitting transfer from Southern Cal. And our rotation starting pitchers, we're going to go Brady Tigert of Arkansas, who trailed off a little bit late in the year, tailed off, that is, but had a year on the whole worthy of being a first-team pick. And we named 3 pitchers, 3 starters, and a reliever. A.J. Causey of Tennessee, another place where I cheated a little bit because Causey came out of the pen a good bit, but he did start some games and was really as good as a starter. He might come in for Chris Stamos in the second inning and then go 6 or 7 innings. It was really good in that role. Leighton Finley at Georgia, who came on really late in the season, is one of our 3 fourth-team starters. And Shane Sadeo of Texas A&M, which had the best bullpen in the league this year. He ended up starting at the end of the year a weekend or two, but mostly was used out of the bullpen and a tremendous player for the Aggies. Alfred, that's one heck of a fourth team.
Yeah, it's a very good fourth team. That's, you put that team together against a lot of other conferences. I think they beat pretty much all of them, and it's the fourth team. Do got to say, with all the pitching, AJ Causey, I've watched him a lot this season, covering a lot of Tennessee stuff. He was a big transfer the Vols got. I don't know if they necessarily thought they probably wanted a little more out of him than what they got, but I like what you said. He did come in for Stamos in a lot of these games after literally like 2/3 of an inning, and he would come in and, pretty much pitch the entire length of the game. He did that. I remember when LSU came to Knoxville for a series, that was one of their big wins, was Causey doing that. And then a lot of these other names, 2 Ole Miss names. We're going to get into Ole Miss later with the bubble watch because they are still kind of teetering on a bubble spot as is. And with them, Jackson Ross was one of the probably slept on transfer pickups at any SEC team this year. That was very good for them, especially at times that team couldn't hit a whole heck of a lot, yet he would seem to be one of the more consistent bats for them. And thoughts and prayers, I think you said it, Ty Evans, I believe, suffered a broken arm, I think, something along those lines. So prayers out to him. He had a great year for Florida, even though Florida maybe not the year they expected either, but great year for Ty Evans. There's just a lot of good names on that list.
Yeah, it is a really, you've got, and I won't spoil it, there's some guys that were like first and second team preseason All-Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Some first in particular. There's a guy that didn't make one of our 4 teams that was a preseason first team All-American. It might be a first teamer. That's how deep this league is. And maybe I made a mistake with that one. That's sometimes you have second thoughts as you're doing this, like, maybe I should have given that guy a little more consideration, but I think I made the right call. But that's just how deep this league is this year. All right, we'll move on to the third team. Ike Irish, our catcher at Auburn, not much of a defender, but boy, that kid can hit and hit pretty well in conference play too. Felt like he never came off the field for Butch Thompson and Auburn. First base, I said this was a deep position. Jared Jones at LSU, who was the Tigers' best hitter most of the year, super consistent, I believe a sophomore, and a kid that I think will probably this time next year maybe getting some All-American run. Second baseman, Peyton Stovall. Started the season hurt, very talented kid out of Arkansas. It was a kid that Arkansas was probably lucky to get through the draft a couple of years ago. And again, started the season hurt, but played really well, and he played for one of the best teams in the country. Arkansas was not an offensive juggernaut by any stretch, but Peyton Stovall, one of the Hogs' best hitters. All right, here's another one where you're just like, I can't believe there are better guys than this guy. But that's the league. Graham Grohovac at third base, Texas A&M, the freshman, who, by the way, was in the discussion for freshman of the year. We'll get to you on who that actually was a little bit later in the show, but he was a tremendous freshman hitter for the Aggies, and I think a guy that's going to go on to have maybe a Major League Baseball career here in a year or two. I'm not sure if he's a sophomore eligible draft guy or a junior eligible draft guy, but guy you're going to watch. A lot of fun to watch him hit a ball. Shortstop Jonathan Vastine Vandy, good hitter, had some pop for them, really good fielder for them. I think he's top 10 in the country in defensive runs saved. You kind of want that from your shortstop, and Jonathan Vastine at Vandy had a really nice year both in and out of the conference. Outfielders, we had some good guys here. Some of these guys missed a little bit of time here and there, but they were, I felt, worthy of a selection. Connor Hijack, I think it's Hisack in Mississippi State. I've heard it said both ways. Outfielder for them, one of the guys that led their late season charge, Charlie Goldstein at Georgia, who was a little bit of a part-timer, I think, in right field for them. I'm not sure if there was an injury involved or that's just a roster that is so deep that he split time with guys. But Charlie Goldstein, I believe he was another Florida Atlantic transfer. I looked that up. He sure was. Lefty hitter, power hitting outfielder for the Bulldogs. Had a really nice season when Georgia had that run for about 3 weeks where it was unstoppable. Charlie Goldstein was a guy that was hitting a lot of bombs for the Bulldogs in that span. Outfielder Ethan Leger, I think he ended the season hurt a little bit, but played pretty well. He was a transfer, I believe, 2 years ago from Tulane. Again, Ole Miss didn't get a lot of attention, but the middle of the order had some really good hitters in there. He was one of them. Third base, DH. And again, this is a spot where you put a guy in the DH spot because he deserved to be on the team somewhere, even though he's at third base. Billy Amick at Tennessee, who got penalized a little bit by a little bit of missed time, but had a great year and an unbelievable year for third baseman in this conference. So if you're wondering why Billy Amick's third team, wait till you see the guys in front of him. Your starting rotation, your third team, Gage Jump at LSU, who was outstanding in the second half of the season as the Tigers made their run. Greg Ferrone of Alabama, who was a little bit hit and miss, but pretty consistent, was a guy that would give you 5 or 6 innings most weekends. Louisville transfer, pitched really well for the Tide. And Trey Poozer of Kentucky, not necessarily a dominating guy, but a guy that could give you 6 innings just about every time he took the ball. That is a very valuable commodity to have in this league. He was probably top 5 in the league in innings pitched. If he wasn't, he was close. Those were our starters. And then Nate Snead at Tennessee, who was not necessarily a dominating guy. He's got a big fastball that I think touches 100 at times. Not a big strikeout guy, but you didn't hit him really hard either. Nate Snead was a guy that Tony Vitello went to time and time and time again when it was the 6th inning or the 5th inning or whatever in a big close ball game. Just a rubber-armed transfer from Wichita State who gave them a lot of big innings. You had some really good jumbo relievers in this league this year, guys that could give you 3 or 4 innings without breaking a sweat, and Nate Snead was one of those guys. So that wraps up our third team for our All-SEC picks.
Yeah, one guy I want to give love to real quick. We mentioned him earlier on this team, Jared Jones. I remember, about a week or two ago, you and I were talking about LSU, and he came up, and he was quietly having – we said, he's quietly been very, very solid this season, and we looked 297 average, on-base percentage over 430. This is all year, by the way. I'm just going to do that for the sake of this conversation, just not only SEC, but all year. He had those 20-plus home runs as well, and it seemed like he just flew under the radar compared to, guys like Tommy White and whatnot. All due respect to Tommy White, he's great as well. Yeah. But Jared Jones really put it together this season very quietly and very well. And the other guy, too, I wanted to talk about, you mentioned Nate Snead being a, control, avoids the hard contact when he pitches. Trey Poozer, I think, from Kentucky was a lot like that. He didn't necessarily have tons of strikeouts like you would see out of some of the other guys we're going to talk about. But, there's some of those, we saw a lot of those pitchers in this league. And I think this third team has a lot of those control guys who avoid the contact as much as possible.
I see the complaint department's getting cranked up a little bit. We'll address that later. That we'll address the hecklers, the bench jockeys, the Sam Smiths, all of you out there. But anyway, there were rhymes and reasons to this. There was a madness to the method, maybe. But in any case, seriously, all right. Our second team, and my goodness, this could be a first team in this league a lot of years. Wait till you see the first team. It is a beauty pageant. Okay, second team catcher. Catcher was super competitive this year. And this guy was a terrific offensive player. He kind of got lost in the shuffle of other guys that also had great years at catchers, but he controlled the running game phenomenally well. I think he threw out almost half of all base stealers, and he hit really well too. Didn't quite hit as well in league play, but most guys didn't. Jackson Appel of Texas A&M, a transfer, I believe, from Columbia. Our second team first baseman, another guy that was a preseason first team All-American, I think most places, Ethan Petrie of South Carolina, the big right-handed hitter who is, I'm guessing, is pretty well on his way to breaking all of Carolina's career home run marks and probably will get there next year. I don't know who the leader is, but I cannot imagine if Ethan Petrie stays healthy next year, somebody will have done 3 years at South Carolina, hit more home runs than that kid's going to end up with. Second baseman at Kentucky, Emilian Petre, really good guy. Just puts the bat on the ball, hit very well in conference play, good fielder, can run. I think anybody would be happy with Emilian Petre as their second baseman. Kentucky did not have a lot of superstars, but I had a lot of guys kind of like Emilian Petre. And it was not a great year for second baseman, but he certainly would be deserving of a first or second team spot just about any year. Third baseman Gage Miller, the JUCO transfer who just carried that Crimson Tide offense much of the year, had a big night in that big game this weekend where Alabama had to have a win. He knocked in 5 runs in that one. Gage Miller is your second team third baseman. Shortstop. This guy didn't light it on fire with the bat in league play, at least in terms of the slugging aspect, but fields his position well, and again, was a key cog in the machine that got hot late. Mississippi State's David Mershon is your shortstop. Sticking in Starkville, Dakota Jordan, another guy that's going to be a top half of the first round pick, maybe. Certainly middle of the first round, perhaps, last I checked. He is an outfielder from Mississippi State. He is on our second team. And then 2 Tennessee guys, Dylan Dreiling and Kavaris Tears. Tears is really fun to watch. I think one of the more fun players in the league to watch. Hits with authority, got a great arm. I don't know if you saw the throw he made from right to third yesterday when a guy wisely chose not to run, but it was one of the strongest throws I've seen all year. Runs well. I'll be very interested to see where Kavaris Tears goes in the draft, which I would presume will be next year. I think he's a sophomore. And sometimes guys are sophomores and draft eligible, but most guys aren't. But Kavaris Tears, a kid who I think really impressed me at times this year and has got a shot to do some big things. Sticking in Knoxville, again, we stick a guy in the DH spot. It is the best guy left over, and that's Blake Burke at Tennessee, who challenged Christian Moore for the home run record. They've gone back and forth. Moore has kind of pulled ahead of him lately. But anyway, Blake Burke is our DH on the team. That's getting pretty volunteer heavy by this point. More vols to come, by the way, on the pitching staff. We went Cal Steven and Jerangelo St. Jude, Mississippi State, probably the best 1-2 starting pitching punch in the league, excepting Hagen Smith and whoever. Hagen Smith and Alfred might have been the best 1-2 punch, given Hagen Smith was involved. But in terms of balance from both your guys, that probably the most balanced 1-2. With an apology to Luke Coleman and Gage Jump, that they're in that discussion too. So it was close. Our third teamer, and I think this guy's been underappreciated a little bit for 3 years. He is not a dynamic guy, doesn't strike out a lot of guys, but he keeps the ball in the park. And in Lindsey Nelson Stadium, that's important. He also pitches a lot of innings. That's a thing that's underrated. A guy that can give you, say, 7 innings and give up 3 or 4 runs in an off night. That's Drew Beam to a T. Drew Beam is one of our second team starting pitchers. And then our closer or our reliever on the second team, Gabe Gackle at Arkansas, their closer, who had an ERA under 2, I think pitched 30-something innings and was just a really, really dominant back-end arm on what was the league's best pitching staff.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about this. That Mississippi State 1-2 punch with Jerangelo and Cal Stevens, unbelievable. Chris, I've been in your ear all season about Jerangelo, raved about him.
You have.
I love that guy and what he is able to do. 8-1 record this year, 3.48 ERA, well improved from a year ago. A year ago, he kind of struggled a little bit to keep runs off the board. This year, not necessarily the same case, and especially I know this is SEC play, and this is SEC play we're talking about, but if we go back to non-conference play, I don't think he got a loss for a while when he started
Yeah.
on the mound. He was their, Sunday guy. They were going to get a win on Sunday for their 1 o'clock pitch whenever game that they played. So huge shout out to him. Blake Burke, it falls into that first baseman category. I don't know if you mentioned this, where it's just so competitive in the league this year among first basemen. But yeah, Burke hit on a separate note, Burke hit another home run. It was a grand slam against South Carolina to really put them way ahead. That set the single season SEC record for grand slams at 11. So this Tennessee team now has that. Just a little side note there. And then, we're going to see a lot more orange, obviously, on this next team.
Yeah. It's been a lot of orange so far. All right, first team, catcher Cole Messina, South Carolina. Catchers, you could have taken any one of probably 3 or 4 guys. Messina had the best offensive year, had the best year in the conference offensively too in conference only play, and was also a kid who I think was a preseason first team All-American. So, there's no fluke about what he's doing here. First baseman, this was kind of an easy pick because he had almost a 600 on base percentage, and that's got to be your first baseman. Corey Collins at Georgia. Incredible year for maybe, one of the best 5 offenses in the country. I was going to say maybe the best offense in the league, and then you got to talk about A&M, you got to talk about Tennessee, and you got to help you sort those guys out. It just probably depends on what you like the most there, but 3 elite offenses. Corey Collins was a guy that would have been the player of the year conversation if it were not for another guy from Georgia. I won't spoil it, but everybody knows who it is. Your second baseman, Christian Moore, for Tennessee. He's going to be a first-team All-American at that spot. Hit 429, 461, 925 was his slash line in SEC play. He's going to leave Knoxville, barring a miracle Blake Burke comeback. And I guess Burke can pass him next year. Can't remember if I think he's draft eligible next year. No, wait, it's this year, isn't it? Yeah,
it is this year. Yeah.
Burke's a junior. He didn't play as much as a freshman, but he's been there for 3 years. Anyway, Moore is probably going to leave Knoxville as the all-time home run leader in Tennessee history, and going to be everybody's probably first-team All-American second base. But I say that I don't know what's going on in the ACC at second base and some other leagues, but I can't really imagine somebody having a better year than Christian Moore at second base. Third baseman Charlie Condon. I guess you could have put him at first. You could have put him in the outfield. Feels like when I saw him play, he played more at third. But anyway, Charlie Condon, again, going to be everybody's All-American somewhere. Shortstop. This one kind of changed hands late in the season, and it was close. But I went Justin LeBron on Alabama, who stepped in and was their second baseman, Alabama's shortstop from day one, had a tremendous year for the Crimson Tide and led an offense that just really was, if not for some of the just elite ones in this league, would have probably gotten more attention. Your outfield, I tried to put a center fielder in here, and I think he deserved it anyway, because when you line up a baseball team, you need a guy who can play center, and that guy was Jace Lavalette, who's going to be a high draft pick next year. Slugged .717 in league play, hit a ton of home runs, was just so consistent for them, and a pretty good defender when I've seen him play. In the outfield, the other guys, I've got Ryan Waldschmidt of Kentucky, who had a tremendous year, a .510 on-base percentage in league play. Just was Kentucky had a balanced lineup up and down, but he was kind of to coin a Reggie Jackson term, the straw that stirred the drink there. I think very deserving first-teamer, transferred, I believe, from Charleston Southern 2 years ago. And then Braden Montgomery, the Stanford transfer, who was maybe the key cog in the Aggies offense. There were so many of them, but a preseason first-team All-American, and I have a feeling he's going to show up on some at least first or second-team All-Americans squads when those are picked too. So our outfield, Lavalette and Montgomery of A&M and Waldschmidt of Kentucky. Our DH/utility guy was Jack Caglione, who, by the way, can also pitch, as you know, was Florida's best hitter and its best pitcher. Our rotation, Hagen Smith of Arkansas, that was the easiest pick probably of all the picks. I mean, Condon was an easy pick. Caglione was an easy first-team pick. But in a year where some of the selections were not not easy. That was you could do that one in your sleep. Your second team starters on your pitching rotation, Ryan Prager of Texas A&M, who was just great all year, and the Luke Holman of LSU, who really kept LSU in it. Started off 3-12 in the league, and he and Gage Jump were so instrumental in just stabilizing that pitching staff, and getting to where they got hotter as the schedule lightened up. So your first team starting pitchers, Hagen Smith, Ryan Prager, Luke Holman. Your first team reliever, Evan Aschenbeck, who not only had a sub-2 ERA, but I think threw over 50-something innings. And I like, one thing I look at in my selections, I'm talking to you, Sam Smith, is not just ERAs, but it's innings pitched. I will give you a little grace if your ERA is a little higher if you can go a lot of innings, because eating innings, especially in this offensive crazy era of college baseball, very valuable. When you could pitch 50-something innings and put up a sub-2 ERA, I don't know with the NIL value, if you could just make everybody free agents for the NCAA tournament, but and then redraft. but somebody pay Evan Aschenbeck a lot of money for what he does, which would be the case on all these first teamers. But just an incredible first team we had here.
Yeah, insane first team. And for everyone watching, I'm going to read Hagen Smith's stat line because I think it might be the craziest stat line I've ever seen from someone in sports. Not this year. This is overall. Keep that in mind. 9-0 record, 1.52 ERA, and 77 innings of work. Walked only 29 batters, opposing batting average of 135 with 150 strikeouts over those 77 innings. That is lights out. There's not a player in the world who could hit this guy right now. There's probably MLB hitters who can hit this guy right now. And he's been so impactful for that Arkansas team. He's just, been the anchor that has been Arkansas pitching, that has kept them in this spot and has gotten them the 2 seed heading into Hoover. And they're, barring something absolutely strange happening, they're going to be a national seed and host a regional and, be hungry for another national title again. So he's been unreal this year. And then Justin LeBron's another guy who you said him while we were going through this, kind of flew under the radar. I didn't really hear a lot about him, and that might have been because Alabama just kind of sat in the middle of the SEC for a lot of this season, just kind of like perusing around and whatnot. But Justin LeBron, 340 batting average while getting on base over 40% of the time. Very good year from him. Not necessarily the biggest power guy. He did hit 11 home runs, but not necessarily the hugest power guy out of that Alabama team. But he could, be, I'll use the term you just said, the Reggie Jackson term. He was the straw that stirred that drink, which was Alabama's offense a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Hagen Smith's year. I'm trying to put it in. I mean, the numbers are incredible for any era of college baseball. But I mean, you couldn't keep the ball in the yard this year. You couldn't keep teams off the scoreboard. We had a bunch of run rule games. What Hagen Smith did this year would have been the equivalent of, I don't remember what the year that Pedro Martinez had. That would have been before your time. But it was the steroid era, and balls are flying out of the yard, and guys are setting home run records, and nobody can hit Pedro Martinez. He had an ERA, I think, of under 2 and a bunch of innings pitched. That would kind of be the Major League Baseball equivalent of what this guy did. I mean, Hagen Smith, in a year of incredible years, Hagen Smith was incredible. That is why he is our pitcher of the year. There's no suspense there. Freshman of the year, we just mentioned him a second ago, Justin LeBron at Alabama. I think Graham Grahovac could have been on that list. Dean Curley at Tennessee would have been on there too. Mm-hmm. Goodyear shortstops just couldn't quite find room for Curley. He was one I did consider, but those are probably the top 3 off my head. I may be missing somebody. I don't think there's a freshman pitcher in there. And the player of the year, and I debated, Christian Moore would have been at a lot of years for sure. I think that Jack Caglione would have been it in any year, just about, because and I know the pitching stats weren't gaudy, but again, a 4.5 ERA is what a 3 1/4 would have been 5 years ago. And Caglione was their most durable and their best starter. So I came really close to splitting the award between Caglione, who had probably the third best offensive year in the league behind Collins. Behind Condon, but Condon's offense was that dominant. Charlie Condon, for 27 outs, generated nearly 23 runs. Caglianone's numbers, in case you were wondering, he was close to 17 runs per 27 outs. So I guess the question is, in fact, Condon created, by Bill James's formula, created 102 runs for that offense, which is incredible. By comparison, you know how great Christian Moore was? He had 78. Corey Collins, you know how great a year he had. He created 65. Now, he missed some time. All that to tell you, those guys, Caglione created 80 runs. Those guys would have been player of the year in just about any other year. But when a guy creates 102 runs for his team, and we're not even to postseason play yet, I don't think I've ever seen a number like that. Again, I thought about splitting it between Caglione and Condon, and maybe that was the right call, but I just went Condon straight up.
Yeah, that's insane that he's doing that. And a lot of the times, Georgia would have off games with their pitching, although there were times when their pitching was great, but he always seemed to be the straw in the drink that stirred it and whatnot. With Caglione, it would have been a good pick too, I think. The pitching numbers, I'm looking at them right now, actually eerily very much the same as last year, pretty much. Just both, I guess that's pretty much a good thing. He did pitch, let 12, right around 12 less innings. That led to less strikeouts. A little less earned runs. The batting average, opposing batting average, slightly went up with him, but yeah, it's just so many options you could have picked here for player of the year. I mean, you looked at what Christian Moore did, what Caglione, Condon did. It's just, it's a toss up. So I think you're pretty much right with anyone you pick here, but if you created over 100 runs and we're not even to Hoover yet, you're doing something very right.
Yeah, I'm going to MLB Pipeline, their draft rankings, which are pretty good, and they do a pretty good job of keeping them up to date. Here's what you've got, and this is a banner year for college players. I mean, you got J.J. Weatherholt of West Virginia, Travis Bazzana of Oregon State. You got Nick Kurtz at Wake Forest. You got Chase Burns at Wake Forest, formerly Tennessee. In fact, MLB Pipeline has got the first 8 guys being SEC guys, but SEC's got an overwhelming presence in the list. Condon's the number 1 prospect for the draft, according to them. Jack Caglione is 3. Braden Montgomery 5. Hagen Smith is 6. And then you go down the list. Billy Amick is 15. Tommy White was a guy that didn't even make our team. That I debated on, and he just, third base was that strong this year. And I know Tommy White's name is going to carry a lot, and maybe that's a mistake. And boy, did that guy really carry them late in the year when they needed it. But I just think you had an unbelievable year third baseman with Condon, with Amick, and all those guys. And I just think it says so much about the league when you can't find room for Tommy White on one of your teams. Maybe that was a mistake, but looking at the last set of numbers I looked at, I just felt like other guys had better years.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends. Oftentimes too with the MLB draft, it's not always like what they're doing in college that they look at. It's more intangible stuff. So a lot of these guys, are placed above that. That's why JJ Banks in the comments just said, how is Amick a better prospect than Semo? That could be a reason. Amick could have some intangible thing that scouts like better, but it's not necessarily true. I could easily see Christian Moore getting picked above Amick. So I don't know. It's just different with how it works. And then even Chris, we go a little bit further back in the first round. There's still a lot of SEC guys that we didn't mention. Bryce Cunningham, Vandy's up there. Ben Hess, the Alabama pitcher, he's up there as well. Going back even further, let me see. Christian Moore, is back at 52. That's weird. And the guy we did mention on the first team pitching wise, Ryan Prager, who had a banger of a year for A&M, he's back at 54 on this pipeline list I'm looking at too. So it's weird. It's a lot more different, but there's just a ton of SEC guys, which was expected either way.
I will make one correction. Now I looked at, I would have put White on our third or fourth team. The numbers I had for him are a week behind, which influenced what I did. So I'll call myself out for a mistake there. But still, the fact that Tommy White didn't make the first couple of teams just tells you what kind of a year it was. I'm guessing on Amick and Moore. Let me check the age differences there. Because I think Moore is an older kid. I mean, he's a kid that sort of rode the bench a little bit as they had other guys, if I remember that correctly. Amick was born November 4th, 2002, so he's just turned 21 about 6 months ago. And let me see, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Moore is younger than that. Where did you say Moore was on the list?
52.
52.
Right by Ryan
Okay.
Prager.
Yeah, okay, he's 20.
He's
Okay,
21 as well.
they were born a couple weeks apart. So, yeah,
Yeah.
they give him a 50 for the hit tool and a 50 for the power. That's more. I'm going to bet that Amick is a better power scorer.
No,
Yeah, they give him a
he had
55
that
for power and a 60 for hit tool. That's what they
right.
said. So, not me, but
No, he did those same numbers at Clemson too when it came to power. I mean, he had excuse me, last year before he transferred to Tennessee, he was all ACC everywhere. You saw his name everywhere just because of how how good of a player he was there, and that's translated to Tennessee this year. I think it's just hard with Tennessee because they have about like 20 power guys. It seems like they have a lot of power guys on the bench that don't play.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a very hard team to evaluate just because of how many bats they have there in Knoxville.
Yeah, Tennessee was kind of rotating corner outfielder guys at the end of the year just because I guess a particular matchup could give you, could play more to a particular lefty or righty, and that's just the luxury they had. I'm looking at other guys that they've got. Amick 15, White 16. Boy, the ACC's got a pretty heavy presence too. Dakota Jordan at 24, so he's fallen off a little bit. He didn't hit quite as well in league play. Bryce Cunningham from Vandy, 33. He could be a what do you call it? A comp first rounder. Was very hit and miss this year. He didn't make one of our 4 teams.
No,
We picked 12 starting pitchers. He would have been in there if his last start hadn't been a bad one. I ended up taking Leighton Finley over him. That was my last pick at pitcher. I made a switch on that one at the last minute. You got Drangela Saintja, who is a switch pitcher. That's not a misprint. He's 41st overall. By the way, his agent, I believe, is CC Sabathia's wife, which is kind of interesting.
Fun fact.
Here's another Ben Hess at Alabama. We've talked all year about how good Ben Hess is. Ben Hess had a pretty bad year until his last 2 starts. Kind of saved Alabama's bacon last night, to be honest. But the talent's there. I mean, Hess has got an ERA north of 6, but he's the number 42 prospect for the draft. That's how killer this league. Carter Holton at Vandy, 47. Now, he may drop a little bit because he had to leave a start with an injury. Carter Holton was a first or second team All-American preseason. Didn't make one of our teams. That's the league we're in this year. Ryan Prager I see worked his way into a second round grade by this. I don't know if Prager was on anybody's radar as a draft prospect before the season because he missed all last year. Luke Holman at 56. I bet you Luke Holman will move up over some of these guys with the year he had. Drew Beam at 57. I mean, my goodness, that's of the top 57 players, how many are from the SEC? 15? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Spears is on the list now. I don't know when he snuck in there, but he's 64. Gage Jump is 65. Blake Burke 67. Peyton Stovall 68. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Another weird one too. Cole Messina. We talked about him. He was our first team catcher. He's all the way back at 136.
Yeah.
And that's really strange to me seeing him all the way back there. But he's the same age as some of the older, as Simone Amick too, at 21 years old. So that's another name that's kind of far back that we're raving about so far.
And what is it? Messina might have gotten hurt last year. South Carolina had just a rash of injuries to its best hitters mid-season, and I can't remember if he was one of those guys or not. But yeah, I mean it's crazy. Travis Smith's in there from Kentucky, 125. Didn't have a big role for them. I mean, I think he was their midweek guy, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
I know he wasn't on the weekend rotation.
He was, yeah. He was their midweek guy. Hunter Hines, too. We talked about him a little bit. He didn't make any of our teams, but he had a really good – I remember he did really good in non-conference play to start the year. He's there at 120 as well.
Thatcher Hurd, who couldn't get together and pitch consistently for – I mean, every other weekend you wouldn't see Thatcher Hurd pitch. He's 101. And I get what we're doing here. It's more about potential, and Hurd's stuff has always been phenomenal. It's the between the ears part that just hasn't worked out. But, yeah,
Too many guys.
Chris Cortez has worked his way on the list. I didn't notice that either. Who's had a great year out of the bullpen for them.
Too many guys. Too good of a league. Too good of a league.
Gage Miller.
Yeah. You mentioned too the ACC. There's a lot of ACC people on here as well. And I just looked. I think they have quite a few, not as much as the SEC. They have quite a few ranked teams. And by quite a few, I mean like a big handful. So a lot of those guys too. I know we're an SEC show, but a lot of those guys are making their names as well.
The one thing I think, and we love SEC baseball. I mean, I've been raving about how good of a league it was for a long time, and I think more people that are fans of, say, football and basketball don't follow baseball are catching on and they're seeing it. But I don't. One thing that I don't like, I wish you had a little more balance, and it's the portal. It's doing it in football. It's doing it in everything. But I don't know that it's necessarily good for the game that it's just so regionally dominated. And the West Coast is just going to get decimated with all those Pac-12 teams going to the Big Ten. Maybe that'll raise the profile of the league there a little bit, but that's such a cold weather environment and such a basketball crazy conference. I think the league is only going to continue to get stronger.
I did too. Yeah. A lot of those recruits too from like California, for example, they're going to want to come play for, Tony V at Tennessee or Van Horn at Arkansas and stuff like that. And yeah, the conferences are just getting dumbed down to very few ones. So I don't know. It's going to be a lot less spread out. And a lot of these schools might suffer because of it, just because of locations and travel and where they're playing, what conference they're in, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And Amanda points out, you don't mention the only two true freshmen starting pitchers in the SEC, one went 8 innings against Arkansas shutout. That would have been the kid at Alabama, Zane Adams, and I can't think of who the second one would have been. Trying to think if any of Florida's was Cade Fisher. No, Cade Fisher's a sophomore. I can't think of who the other guy would have been.
I remember Zane Adams. Zane Adams had a really good Sunday start a few weeks ago.
South Carolina had a couple of freshmen in the rotation. I think Tyler Pitzer was there for a bit. He's a freshman. Eddie Copper, I think, is their midweek guy. I don't know if he ever made a midweek. They're freshmen, but I can't think of anybody. I don't know who the other freshman would have been. Maybe Amanda can let us know.
Yes, but I would like to know. It was just
a transfer dominated league.
Right. Matt said just joined. Did Ryan Waldschmidt make the list? He did. He was, what did we put him? 3rd, 4th team?
We put him first, and we'll tweet those out later.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I'll run it down from the top again for the people that are coming late as soon as I can find it. First team. Cole Messina, Corey Collins, Christian Moore, Charlie Condon, Justin LeBron, Jace Lavalette, Ryan Waldschmidt, Braden Montgomery, Caglione, your utility guy, rotation, Hagen Smith, Ryan Prager, Luke Holman, and Evan Aschenbeck, your reliever. And then I went second team, Jackson Appel, Ethan Petrie, Emilian Petre, Gage Miller, David Mershon, and Dakota Jordan from Mississippi State, and then a bunch of Vols, Dylan Dreiling, Kavaris Tears, Blake Burke, is your outfield / DH guys. 2 Bulldogs in your rotation, Cal Steven, and Durangelo St. Drew Beam was the other starter, and Gabe Gackle is the second team reliever. I won't name the 3rd and 4th teams, but they're there if he wants to go back and look at them. Mark, Christian Moore had a great year, but let me give you some SEC only stats. Charlie Condon, 451, 567, 1063 was his SEC line. Moore went 429, 461, 925. Runs created for the year, Condon had 102 and Moore had 78. Now, Moore did play a more valuable defensive position, but I don't think that makes it. Charlie Condon is going to be everybody's National Player of the Year.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, you said it too with the runs created. That's so much of Georgia's offense came from him. So that's a very important and very, crucial stat to look at. So, but Mark, I understand the cause for wanting more to be in as well. Like I said it myself, I think you could have went more Caglione and then Condon, and then you could have had a good argument for either. But I think
Yeah.
Charlie Condon makes a very good case, if not the best case for it
The,
overall.
the only guy in the last decade that's had a year that rivals what Condon just did is maybe Adley Rutschman at Oregon State. And Rutschman had extra value because he was catching, but that was, I mean, I've covered the league a long time. Charlie Condon probably just had the best individual offensive season in the history of SEC baseball. In fact, I don't think there was a probably about it. I think he did. So
I'd have to agree as well. Yeah.
I mean, in a typical year, this is how tough the league was. I think that you take Condon out of the equation. I think Jack Caglione would have been probably your player of the year because he had the best offensive year of anybody not named Condon. Although in the SEC, Moore did out hit him in the league. Well, not by a lot. Slash lines 429, 461, 925 in SEC play. Caglione went 375, 514, 79. So yeah, he did out hit him in the league. But when that guy serves as your third starter too and does a pretty good job, they call him Jack Toney for a reason. But I mean, here's my point. You take those guys out, Christian Moore would have been SEC Player of the Year, I don't know, probably half the time in a given year. But
they all
this year.
Right. No, and same thing with Caglione. I mean, he would have been Player of the Year pretty much any other year as well. So it's like, I don't know. You could have chose between the three, and it would have been great. But Jimmy in the chat, Coach of the Year.
Oh, I knew I forgot something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's Nick Mingione.
Yep, I was going to say the same thing. I think when splitting the SEC.
You had a lot of good coaches, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say splitting the SEC crown. Coming off a year, he's so good with that small ball stuff, and he didn't necessarily at the beginning of the year. I at least kind of questioned their lineup's ability to hit for power and whatnot, but in the end, I mean, they're coming out on top. They split the SEC title, regular season title with Tennessee, based off of wins, and they're going to be competitive. They're going to have a regional as well, so I'm going to have to give it to Mingione. Second, if I had to give someone second, Tony Vitello is probably a good answer as well. But I just think with Mingione doing what he did, kind of a bounce back year for Kentucky, and to get them in contention to really realistically go to Omaha, I think he's the best and correct answer for it.
What Wes Johnson would have been a valid choice a lot of years too. I mean, how many times does Georgia fire a coach and then maybe host a super regional the next year?
Not very often.
In a league that's as hyper competitive as it's ever been. So I mean, he would be. If you want to make a short, and Dave Van Horn, my goodness, Dave Van Horn is out. I mean, it's kind of like a Nick Saban thing where Nick Saban probably deserved to be coach of the year a lot of times, and he wasn't.
Right.
Because Alabama's always good. And the coach of the year is a guy that usually does it when nobody's expecting it, or he's crashed his own thing, which is why I didn't put, oh, good grief. I've drawn a blank.
What were you saying? I'm sorry. Yeah.
I mean, the coach of year is just kind of a weird award, and a lot of times it's the guy that's crashed his own program, and then brought it back later.
Right.
And so I don't do that. But I mean, you could have in a given year, you could have made arguments. I think for Jim Schlossnagle, my goodness, they were number one in the country a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
It's just that was the kind of year it was.
Yeah. A lot of good managers all around the league, but I think if we have to give it to someone based off of last year compared to this year, what we expected from each team, I think Kentucky outperformed compared to every other team with what their expectations were, and a lot of that was Mingione and his strategy, small ball strategy and whatnot, with how he was able to work a team who not necessarily had a lot of power, but they were able to rack up a lot of wins, be ranked in the top 10, top 5, sometimes some weeks by D1. And like I said, here they are, heading into the postseason with a shot to not only win the SEC title, but go to Omaha at the very least. So they'll be exciting to watch going forward, and congrats to them on a great year.
And by the way, if you are watching this, an earlier version, I did realize that we left Tommy White out. So I'm going to go back and put him in. We'll tweet that out. So rather than just not admit my mistake and give you a BS answer why we did what we did, I goofed. I made a mistake. Tommy White should have been on one of those teams. So you will see him backfilled into that. So, now that we've hit all the awards, I think we were going to do a little bubble talk because the SEC right now, ladies and gentlemen, is a mess in a good way. If you didn't watch this weekend, what happened? Here's what happened. Okay, you had Arkansas, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Kentucky going into the weekend. We're going to be national seeds, barring a complete collapse. All of them left the weekend series winners, except for Arkansas, which had to play A&M. So unless it was a rain out, somebody was going to lose the series. And so nothing really changed there with Tennessee sweeping, Kentucky winning the series. What did kind of upset everything, Matt's on me back. Hey, Matt, I've been on Kentucky for a while. I've been calling out Kentucky as a good team when nobody else was. So I'm sorry if Kentucky plays in a league where you've got maybe the 4 top teams in the country, but that's the case. Anyway, back to where I was going. Georgia, I think, had a real shot to crash the national seed conversation. And my mind was there. I think that people have been underselling Georgia for a while. And if you were looking at how they were playing and the dominating fashion in which they were winning games, you would have seen it too. Georgia, I did not expect to lose a series to Florida, and that's done 2 things. Georgia is 6 in the RPI, I believe, and 7 in KPI, which by the numbers would be hosting. But we're not done with the season, and Georgia's got a really tough matchup with an LSU team that is, I've been saying this for you. I've got receipts on this. LSU is a better team than people think. I think LSU is a sleeper to win the tournament next week. That's how good I think LSU is. So that's going to be one thing that changed over the weekend is Georgia's kind of fallen from its perch as a potential national. I mean, I say falling. You never know what the committee's thinking. The committee, if they did it today, might have Georgia's and that. I just don't know if the committee's going to give the SEC 5 national seats. So we'll see. Lose to LSU, I'm going to guess that's going to be an excuse for the committee to give somebody else a national seat and just have Georgia host, which Georgia's going to host. No matter what happens, Hoover, Georgia's going to be a host. Mississippi State, this is what I hate about the RPI. State came into the weekend, I think 15 or 16 in the RPI, took 2 or 3 from Missouri. But because Missouri is like 101 in the RPI, and because that was in Starkville, State took 2 out of 3, lost the game that it lost by a run. Although, to be fair, one of the games it won by a run. One of the games it won by a run. I guess I said it right the first time. In any case, State dropped from, I think, 15 to 22 in the RPI, which if the committee goes straight RPI on the hosting, and look, we got ball to play in Hoover. Look, if State goes and beats Ole Miss, takes a game from Mississippi State, maybe gets one from Tennessee in the same bracket, then it probably sneaks in. But as we speak right now, if the committee goes straight RPI, which it's been known to do, State's probably out. Again, probably not helped by the fact that you got 5 other teams that are already hosting. But then this is where it gets crazy. You got 5 teams tied at 13 and 17. And sometimes that gets you in and sometimes it doesn't. But we never had a situation where we had 5 teams tied there. And I think all 5 are in the top 30 of the RPI. So, man, it's going to be a crazy week. You've got Alabama, South Carolina. I don't think that's a play-in game. I think the loser gets in regardless, but I think the winner can probably sleep pretty easily. Carolina's got a 19 RPI. It's got a 23 KPI. That's going to get considered. And Alabama is 18 in RPI and 17 in KPI. Alabama's not going to get left out. Alabama's going to have a top 20 RPI. You're not going to get left out of the tournament at 13 and 17 in this SEC. So I'm going to say right now we got 8 teams safe. LSU Georgia is going to be interesting. LSU's RPI is 30. Lose that one to Georgia, I don't know what that does. Win it, you're squarely in the top 30. And again, if the committee emphasizes how you played late in the season, and I don't know if it will or if it won't, but if it does, that's going to help LSU. So you got that. I don't know. I think I'd still put LSU in with the loss there, but I don't know what they're thinking. And I think the most interesting game of the tournament is Vandy, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been ugly for both those programs at times. Florida was not even on the bubble at D1 this week. And because I think D1, nobody was expecting Florida to go in and win 2 or 3 at Georgia. That's exactly what happened. Florida is not going to finish below 500 overall, no matter what happens in Hoover. That's a big deal because I've seen teams that finish one game above that have gaudy RPIs that get in. Florida's 24 RPI. Losing to Vandy could knock them out of the top 30, but I'm not sure it will. It's just going to depend on what happens the rest of the week. Florida's 20 in KPI. Vandy's 27 in the RPI and 18 in KPI, but Vanderbilt had a much better mark out of the league. Remember, Florida for a while couldn't beat anybody in midweek, while Vanderbilt's pretty good in the midweek, lost one game and had some good wins there. So I think that's the interesting one. I think the winner, especially if it's Vandy's, probably going to get in. The loser may want to maybe sweating that one out and scoreboard watching other places. Speaking of which, what scoreboard watching are we going to need to be doing in the SEC? Because there's going to be other places that affect things, and I know you've got a list of that.
Yeah, a ton. I mean, I'm looking around another SEC team too. We didn't talk about yet. It's going to be very tough for them because they're in the first 4 out according to D1. So this, everyone knows what that means, but they have to have stuff happen. Yes, Ole Miss. That's a huge one, and the reason is they got a huge rivalry game to open up Hoover against Mississippi State. They're 32nd in RPI, which honestly, for their situation, is probably really good for them. And then they did get swept by LSU this past weekend. The weekend before, they took a big series against A&M, and that would be who they would play to start double elimination if they were to beat Mississippi State A&M. So they may be a Hoover party crasher, if you will, if they really put their mind to it. And I think if they could finesse their way out of double elimination play and get on to the single elimination, weekend play, they really might, get thrown into a regional somewhere. Obviously, they're not going to host with their kind of record, but they might get thrown into a regional somewhere and work their way into that. But a big game to watch this weekend. I was doing research for Chris and for the show beforehand. Cincinnati and UCF in the Big 12, they are both last 4 in. And the funny part about it is they actually play each other to open up the Big 12 tournament in Arlington. So that is a massive game for those two teams. One win knocks them out. I would think, really does knock them out. But I think a win for either one of them puts them in. And they're not going to host. But those two teams, as of right now, according to D1, they're in SEC hosted regional. So Athens for Georgia, and then Cincinnati's in Lexington for Kentucky. UCF, I'm sorry, is in Georgia, according to D1. But again, they play each other. That's going to be a huge game to watch. Northeastern's on the brink. I think they were pretty solid in conference play. They have a really high RPI for their level that they're at. One would think, a win for them against I saw their first tournament game is Hofstra this week. If they were to win there, they take care of it. And I'm looking at the other ones. A big story to watch, and I think a lot of SEC teams could use this. Utah has not a lot of huge quad 1 wins. Their RPI is low. They ended the year really rough, and the way the Pac-12 tournament works, it's like a lot of the others. It's that pool play, so it's like 3 teams in a pool, and that's how you're seeded. Yeah, it's weird. But their pool that they have is Southern Cal, USC, and Oregon. And they were not good against those 2 teams this year. So Utah may be one who's leaving the conversation if that were to happen. So a team like Ole Miss could step in. And there's others outside of the SEC that are first 4 out. D1 had Virginia Tech, James Madison, and Maryland in that conversation as well. But with that being said, I think James Madison's RPI 44th, so not bad. Virginia Tech had a lot of quad 2 and 4 wins. They did not have a good quad 1 record though, so that's key for them. They had a brutal end to that to the end of the season. I mean, the ACC is better than a lot of people think. They had to play Duke, UNC, Miami, and Virginia to end the year, and those are some tough teams to play. And I believe they do. The ACC does pool play too, and their pool is Duke and NC State. Not a good draw for them. So that's where some of these other SEC teams could, kind of crawl their way in. And Maryland, we mentioned Maryland. I believe Maryland's not even in the Big Ten tournament yet. They're still on the bubble. So that could really hurt them. So Maryland's going to need a lot of stuff to happen if they want to get in. But the big kicker, and to connect it all back with Ole Miss, is one of the big conversations, as far as can they just finesse their way in. They have to have a lot happen. If you're an Ole Miss person watching, I would watch that UCF Cincinnati Big 12 game. That's going to be huge because that may, throw one of them out. Of course, watch the Mississippi State game. I would think if you're Ole Miss, what you do on your end is you need to beat Mississippi State. I think that's obvious. And you got to at least last or for a while and be competitive, or find your way out of double elimination in Hoover. Because if you do that and you get a few of these last 4 in bubble teams to hang around, then you're good. I mean, I think you're good, and you put yourself in a good spot to at least get a seed somewhere.
Now, the D1 thing, is that the one they did pre-weekend? Because I can't find an updated one.
It was. I'm the same way with you. I could not find an updated one. So this is beforehand.
I think Ole Miss would be old news at this point. I want to see Maryland and James Madison. So Maryland didn't make the Big Ten tournament? That's crazy.
From what I looked, it didn't seem like their bracket didn't put them in it. They don't have a lot of teams in, because the teams that are in that I'm looking at: Indiana, Purdue, Nebraska, Ohio State, Illinois, Penn State, Michigan, Iowa. So I don't see them on there.
They'll be toast. They got swept by Penn State.
Right.
And then 111. So forget that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And you are right about Ole Miss. I guess getting swept by LSU kind of really did hurt them then, if that's not updated. But who knows? If they get it again, that UCF Cincinnati matchup, that's one of the bigger matchups bubble wise this week, and that's going to affect a lot of stuff. So we just kind of got to wait and see for that.
Yeah, and I think James Madison will get a bump since that, because it took 2 out of 3 at Troy, and Troy is, I think, is going to be an NCAA tournament team. So yeah, I'll wait and see. I've got a Baseball America subscription. I'm going to see if they have updated theirs while we're doing this.
Yeah. And then with James Madison too, I'll just mention, they're going to play Georgia Southern to start their tournament play. And I would win that at least, because they got to face Louisiana more than likely Louisiana after that, because Louisiana has to wait on either a Monday or Tuesday winner for their first game, and then they would play the winner of Georgia Southern, James Madison. So if I'm James Madison, I'm sitting there. RPI is not totally bad for the level that they're at, but they're really banking on a Georgia Southern win to help them out, and other factors.
I usually do a kind of my own bracket stuff. I hadn't had the time this year, and it kind of, after a while, it kind of becomes pointless, because I'm not sure the committee always digs in at the level that some of us that do this does. And so, it's trying to guess what somebody else does, or what's like the year that Ole Miss got in the tournament. I mean, nobody saw that coming, I think, including Ole Miss.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't think BA's done anything this weekend. They've got a bubble watch. Yeah. Let me see what they had with the SEC. The BA has a different take. If I'm gonna, I tend to like D1 over BA a little better. And maybe that's bias. I have friends at D1. I think both of them do great jobs. But I think D1 puts a lot more resources into college baseball. Their BA's job is to cover all levels of baseball. And I think the college staff is a little short, but they're both really good. I mean, Teddy Cahill and those guys do a great job too. It's just more of them at D1.
Right.
Yeah, they haven't put an update yet, so I don't know where this stands. But those are the Sun Belt's going to be one to watch. The ACC. I'm going to pull up the ACC standings quickly.
Mhm. Big
It
12
is. I've
too.
never seen it. I've never seen a year where two conference. I mean, you think you kind of think the SEC's been so dominant. There's no room for anybody else to be that close. But the ACC is just about as loaded as it's ever been this year.
Oh my good. Yeah.
Louisville's 52 in the RPI. I don't know where they stand in terms of the of getting in after this weekend. Let's see, what did Louisville do? Louisville got it took all three at Notre Dame at home. So that's probably going to push Louisville up from where it was. I would presume Clemson, NC State, Wake all in, North Carolina, Virginia, Duke all in. Georgia Tech this weekend. Did you go over that one? We've gone over a lot.
We have, yeah. Georgia Tech, I think I went over.
They lost 2 out of 3 at Mike Martin Field.
Right. I went
down in
over Virginia
Tallahassee.
Tech. They were
Okay.
the bubble team. And Virginia Tech, I told you, had that brutal stretch towards the end. But
Yeah.
yeah, they need a lot to go their way as well. But I'm looking at the top 25 D1 has, and there's a ton of ACC teams in here. Haven't talked about Wake Forest. They're obviously going to be a national seed. Clemson's in the top 5. Florida State's been hanging in the top 10 all year. Duke's pitching has been lights out. Go watch that if you like good pitching. They have some good pitchers there. Back end of the top 25, Virginia, NC State, North Carolina, they're up at 7. I didn't even mention them. They're a top 10 team as well. So it's a pretty good conference. I know the SEC is king, and I still think it's king when it comes to college baseball, but the ACC definitely, has their fair share of good play on the diamond.
Now, Matt, just because we love the SEC doesn't mean we have to trash everybody else.
I love college sports, Matt. That's what I have to say to that. I love college sports. But no, it's just, we mentioned this too, just to see, because there's obviously, a lot on the line for a lot of these bubble teams. Obviously, you have the 5 SEC teams that are tied with that same conference record. So a lot of these teams in these other conferences, huge deal. Huge deal.
Sam, that's out of our depth, sir.
Not for too long, Sam. I could do it for about probably a minute. Tops.
Now, yeah, other years maybe. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting is UCLA has really hit a rough patch as it's about to jump leagues, and Southern Cal hasn't been. I mean, Southern Cal 25 years ago was maybe the dominant program in college baseball, or close to it, with apologies to LSU, and they've kind of fallen off a map. But yeah, I mean, the teams that were going to the Big Ten from the Pac-12 were supposed to make it stronger, and they've all face planted. And maybe that's got something to do with the conference move too. It's just not as attractive to transfers, unless you got 1 year. I'm sure that's
yeah. It's just a lot different. And I mean, we got to look. I don't know. I'm not too educated on Cal Berkeley baseball, but they're going to the ACC, so they're going to a competitive baseball conference. So I don't know if they're going to like that move or not, but it'll be interesting to watch. A lot of these moves are going to be weird and whatnot.
Sam, Northern Colorado does play baseball. I think that and Air Force are the only 2 D1 programs in the state. Colorado doesn't have baseball. Colorado State doesn't have baseball.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 4 or 5 Power 5 schools that don't. Wisconsin's one.
I'm trying to think of others too.
Gosh, I know them and I can't think of them.
Let's see.
Boise State's not Power 5, but they don't have baseball. They brought it back a couple of years ago, and then COVID did it in.
Trying to see what else. This isn't.
I can. Go ahead. Colorado.
Yeah, and then I found this isn't Power 5. Does SMU have a baseball team or?
No, which is kind of surprising.
That's weird. Yeah, it's a hotbed, I would think, slightly for baseball. Actually, not slightly. It is a hotbed for baseball.
Yeah.
Down in Dallas. That's weird. Interesting.
Yeah, there's a couple more that I'm forgetting, but oh, good grief. Well, anyway, I think let's wrap it up. See if Iowa State. Thank you, Sam. I knew I was leaving somebody out. Now Iowa does, and Iowa's pretty good every now and then, but Iowa State does not have baseball. There's about 4. I think we named most of them.
I think so too. Yeah, and then you said Boise State.
Yeah.
These are
which
ones. These are
sucked because
ones.
they were bringing it back as a big thing, and then COVID got it, and they couldn't
couldn't get it up and running.
revive it. But yeah. All right, we will be at the SEC tournament. I'll be there. I think I'm going to be there Tuesday and Wednesday, and I got to get back to Nashville for into school and family stuff and all that. You're going to be down there. I think you're going to be down there the days I'm not down there. Is that correct?
Thursday through the championship on Sunday.
So we'll have you covered down there with somebody. And then, we'll hit it hard next week. This time next week, we'll be on the eve of the Field of 64. So we'll have a lot to talk about next Sunday night.
Oh, yes. Ton to talk about. We'll have a lot of content, too, after the tournament, all that stuff. I'm excited. It should be a good tournament. Never been down there either, so this should be fun for me and for.
It's a fantastic. If you've never been to Hoover, they really do it well. They take a lot of pride. It's a fun event. Sam, we will definitely try to hang. Get in touch with me. Reach out to me on Twitter, I guess is the best way to do it. We'll exchange info. I'd love meeting you guys down there for lunch or dinner. Although it's hard to do sometimes when you're covering the games. There's 4 games a day. Those first 3 days, that's a lot. And God help us if there's a rain out, because that just baseball's always good, but I don't appreciate baseball quite as much when it's in at 1 a.m. after you've been, sitting watching raindrops for 3 hours. Which it's like a bylaw of the SEC tournament that you're going to have rain. Right.
Yeah. No, that in the hot sun, the combination's not good, and then 1 a.m. it all hits you, and you're like, I'm ready to call it on today. But no, I'm super excited. If there's anyone watching, and you're going down there, please feel free to say hi. If you recognize my face at all, or Chris's face, it's exciting. It's a very, very cool time.
Yeah. Matt, I'm not dressing up for Sam. That's just for awards. Other than that, we don't dress up around here. So in any case, you guys going to Hoover, have a safe trip. Keep an eye on the weather, bring a rain jacket, because you always need it in that ballpark, it seems like. God bless everybody. Have a great rest of the weekend. Fun days. By the way, we're also going to do something pretty cool with the channel we hadn't done before, and it's not involving baseball. I'll just leave it there. I think we can pull this off between now and then. I feel like every time I say that, life bites me in the butt, and it doesn't happen. But we got something pretty cool planned that I think people are going to like. So I'll leave that all here. Hopefully we can deliver this week. Anyway, thank you all for watching. We will tweet out our SEC teams later, or you can go back and watch it early in the broadcast if you join us late. And again, God bless you guys. Thanks for watching. He's Alfred Ezman. I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.